Okay. So yeah, welcome to In Our Hands. So I think it's just to give you a little bit of a background to kind of where Revolution for Good came from. Um, so we are a newly formed organisation. We were initially called Revolution Scotland, but COVID changed all of that. So we're a charitable community benefit society based in Murray, and what that means is that we're a community-owned social enterprise and charity. So and that's there because of a charity that started back in 2017 called Murray School Bank. So we set up a charity to support children living in poverty with school uniform and warm winter items, and that gave us the opportunity to speak to parents who told us that they were stuck and that they really needed some support to step away. And our board had to also look at how we would make Murray School Bank sustainable. So the two things came together, and that ended up being a community benefit society. Which the reason we did that is because of the community support that we got with Murray School Bank. We really felt that the community solution was the answer. And so yeah, we are a training and development organisation, and what we do is deliver training and development to businesses locally, and then use that profit to life coach families to help them out of poverty. COVID has changed that somewhat. Um, we couldn't use Scotland in our name because we needed agreement from Scottish Government, and they were a bit busy dealing with a global pandemic, so we had to change our name to Revolution for Good. And the need that's out there has created a demand for support for families, and so we've set up a counselling organisation, a kind of that's registered with the BSAP, and so that's really exciting because that's going to be launching in the next couple of weeks. And we've currently got a share offer live, so that's the community-owned part of the organisation. And that's really important to us, is that the organisation is owned by the community and the people that use it. So I suppose to talk about where it comes from with regards to me, I was born for a need to make a difference. No matter how big or small, I just need to do something to help others. And I don't know if anybody can ever understand that, but it's there. It's kind of like a fire in my belly, and it's something that I need to do. And I am going to share some of my story, and that's something that I have done many times, but I've never done to this level really, because there's a lot of stuff that I suppose it really does explain why I'm here and why I'm doing this. And I truly believe there isn't a human being on this planet that can understand how it feels to be me. I've watched recently a series of short films on YouTube called Removed, where a little girl tells her story, and her story is about being removed from the family home due to violence and things that are going on. And I actually I identified it's kind of told through her thoughts and her feelings, and I totally identified. I grew up in really difficult circumstances, which is probably the politest way to describe it, and I would say it still affects me even now. And I think you can overcome your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviours, but erasing memories is really hard, and they come back at the weirdest of times. I know there's been lots of talk around and a lot of activity around adverse childhood experiences and how that affects you, how it affects your physical well-being in later life. And I truly believe in that. I truly believe that that's the case for me. I don't know how much everybody knows about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, But you know, my score is 9 out of 10, and not 9 out of 10 as, you know, isolated incidents. 9 out of 10 from birth to age 10 consistently. And that was really tough, you know. And we're aware that, you know, ACEs didn't come from poverty, isn't an ACE. You know, but actually poverty is entwined in the whole thing. You know, it's connected. And I suppose the question, it's like the chicken and egg. Is it the poverty that causes the adverse childhood experience, or is it the situation around the adverse childhood experiences that causes the poverty? And I think no matter what, it's kind of sewn into the tapestry. It's kind of like that complex history. And I think in my case, poverty wasn't necessary. Both my parents worked, and my dad did a pretty good job. But actually, it was the adverse childhood experiences that caused the problem. It was the parental behaviour that caused the problem, because you know, my dad, when he finished work on a Friday, he went to the pub. When he went to the pub, he didn't leave there until he got drunk, you know, and that was really hard as a child, because he was really aggressive and violent. And if he wasn't home by closing time, my mum would lock the door, and he always came home to a locked door, so which meant that he always broke the window and let himself in. And you know, that was a weekly pattern for my life for the first 10 years. And that was really difficult, you know. At weekends, it just caused me a lot of fear. I would lie in my bed waiting for it to happen, waiting to hear my dad shouting at the door and the glass breaking, and you know, for him to come up the stairs and beat my mum up, basically, because that's what he did, for locking him out. And you know, I would just sit behind that bedroom door hearing everything, every punch, every kick, and it terrified the life out of me. And I would always open the door eventually, because I felt like I had to check how badly hurt my mum was. So it was like there was a need to be that carer. I had to care for her. I had to look after her. And my dad, when I looked at my dad, I just saw violence. I was absolutely terrified, you know, and I was really compelled to look after my mum. And you know, for as young as I can remember, and I mean, like, you know, just slightly beyond toddler years, if you look back to when you can remember, I just remember calling the ambulance like all of the time. It's funny because I had this really great relationship with the porters at the hospital, who babysat me every time my mum was seen by the doctors. You know, they knew me. I knew them all by their first name. They used to play cards with me. They fed me sweeties, and they were really kind. You know, but that's a really sad state for a child to be in. I used to stay with them until either my mum was sent home, or my sister or my auntie would come and pick me up. And you know, I look back, and it was not so much about poverty, but there was a huge amount of poverty in our house. Do you know, there was because my dad drank all the money, so there was never anything in our house. I just have memories of like Saturdays and Sunday mornings where my parents would be asleep. They're usually on the floor or on the sofa where they landed drunk the night before, and the place would be a mess. And you know, I would be cleaning up behind them and then go and make my own breakfast. And if there was anything there, I recall getting a chair from the kitchen table to push up against the cooker so I could climb up on it so I could fry an egg. And I can't tell you how old I was, but I just know I was little and I couldn't reach the cooker. And if there wasn't anything in the fridge or the cupboard, I used to empty the pockets of whatever drunk person was in the living room and go to the shop. And as a child, I chose to buy sweets and chocolate. You know, who wouldn't? And that became the start of a kind of battle, a real battle with eating and health. And then I used to hide all the stuff that I never ate, and I stole food wherever I went. So my sister laughs because I used to go and stay with her. She was 18 years older than me, and rescued me a lot. But you know, she used to laugh because I would steal the biscuits out of her biscuit tin. and think that nobody knew. But yeah, as the years went on, my parents separated, but nothing changed. I was 8 when they separated, and you know, he would still break in at weekends. And you know, there's just a number of incidents etched in my head that will never leave me. And family and neighbours, you know, they tried to intervene. It wasn't uncommon for me to be swept away to go to my sisters or my aunties at weekends. They tried their hardest to kind of get me away from this cycle that just happened all of the time, to the point that, you know, by the time I was 8, it was completely normal. It's just what it was, and it didn't bother me. And I would, you know, I recall being at a neighbour's house. We lived in a maisonette, and we were up the top house in the maisonette, and there was a family underneath it that I was really good friends with, one of their kids, and I remember staying there, and we were lying in our bed, and could hear the screaming, and my friend was getting really upset, and I just thought, it's just my dad, it's fine. My dad tried to kill my mum that night. And I went into the house in the morning to find my mum lying face with her back into the sofa and her jacket on the floor covered in red liquid, which I said, that's just rum. At that point, my mum turned round, and I had seen so many beatings, I was completely immune to it. It didn't bother me. But I didn't recognise her, you know. And back to the hospital again. So it was like this cycle. And that whole left me with, nobody understands how traumatic that is. I as an adult, I experienced a recurring dream, and I've had lots of therapy for it. Do you know, it's haunted me forever, where somebody's coming up the stairs, and that's all about that breaking and entering. And you know, if you fast forward to my teenage years, my dad stopped drinking, and everything got amazing. You know, from having no food in the house to not having anybody looking after me and experiencing neglect and all of the things that go on with that. My mum and dad got back together, and my dad stopped drinking, and everything got happy as far as they were concerned. You know, everything was great. They had money. They had no money worries anymore. You know, and but these experiences had shaped my future. I was a really angry, anxious, lonely, scared teenager who just couldn't wait to get away. And that's what I did. You know, I got away, and I was determined never to be how they were. And, you know, I became successful, and I was earning a lot of money. But I had me with me and all of that stuff. And that's what happens to kids, you know, that experience poverty and all of the things that goes with it. If they don't get support, they take it all with them. And it's about breaking that cycle. You know, I had been shaped at that point, I think, to, you know, to do I wanted to be so different from them, but I was exactly like that. And you know, alcohol, drugs, food, it all took away the pain and the emptiness. And by the time I was 25, I hit rock bottom. I found myself full cycle, the violent alcoholic drunk. And that for me is really, really painful, that, you know, that's kind of what happens. And if I could do anything to change that for a child, then I absolutely will. Do you know, I found recovery. I spent many years thinking that I was an addict and I was an alcoholic, and actually learning who I am has taught me that I was a child that experienced extreme trauma and poverty through adverse experiences. And it's taken many years. It took many years of therapy and peer support. You know, peer support was a huge thing for me. You know, being among people in the community that would support me, that gave me true recovery and the ability to be happy, and realise that actually my parents gave me everything that they could, but they weren't able to manage a cycle that they'd been given. Unfortunately for me, I've been able to do that. I broke that cycle, and my child has not had to endure any of those experiences. Although she would tell you she's neglected, that there's never any food in the fridge because she's 14. So that's kind of how she sees it. But for me, supporting families to break that cycle for their children is so important. And that's what Revolution for Good is for me. I truly believe that a community-owned organisation where the people experience and that lived experience and that lived experience have a voice, and it's important for them, you know, to be shaping the services, to support families and take charge of their future and just walk alongside them while they kind of stumble on and take steps to the future that they want to have. Instead of doing too, which I know that some agencies kind of can do that, and I think we're moving forward into a kind of more community-based support services. And I'm just really, really passionate about people being at the heart of the solution and driving it forward. Excuse me, because without them, I think we're just making it up as we go along. And that's kind of me. Do you know, I just, that's where my passion comes from. It's from my own lived experience, and I'm just really excited. There's so many really, really exciting things happening with Revolution for Good. Today we got some funding to start a 6-month pilot to deliver coaching with families, which we've started anyway, but being able to, as volunteering, but being able to actually advertise and take on a part-time coach is just going to be really exciting. So it's a huge step forward. So I'm going to stop talking now, and with that I am going to introduce Professor John McKendrick, who is a Professor of Social Justice at Glasgow Caledonian University. He's really passionate about ending poverty and co-directs the Scottish Poverty and Inequality Research Unit, and he writes a research column for the Scottish Anti-Poverty Review, and he's currently co-editing the new version of Poverty in Scotland 2021. So I'll just hand over to you, John, if that's all right.
Sure, thanks very much. You see, just let me know, talk to me if you can see that screen share.
I can see it.
Yep, grand, and that's me not at the start. That's not very clever. So thanks very much for coming along tonight. I'm a big picture person tonight, so what I'm trying to do is give a sense of what the challenges are here in Scotland at the current time. I'm almost speaking to people that know the answer, because the fact that you've came along in your own time in the evening tells us you kind of get it. You know there's an issue to address. And while I know there's an awful lot of good work goes on in Moray, I'm never sure whether it's Moray or Moray, so just let me make my mistake and we'll move on. I know the work that Mary McCallum does, and I'll just embarrass her that you know she get acknowledged in the New Year's Honours list for the work during the coronavirus crisis. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing that the rock solid work that people all over Scotland were doing during the last year and will have to do over the next few months is being recognised at a national level. So apologies for embarrassing Mary, but I know there's a lot of good work going on. By looking at the chat there, I know it's not just people from Moray that's here tonight, good people from Inverclyde, and I know there's a power of good work going on in Inverclyde as well. And also East Renfrewshire, which is interesting, one of the more affluent parts of Scotland, but nevertheless there is need in pockets of East Renfrewshire, and that kind of talks to maybe the points that I want to make tonight. I'll just broadly give you a scale of what you already know, just to re-emphasise the scale of what lies ahead. Globally, we're talking that poverty will go beyond 1 billion people. It's a ridiculous number in the 21st century, even though coronavirus is an unprecedented challenge. With the capacity we have, with the technology we have, with the skills we have, with the global infrastructure we have to address global problems, it is quite an embarrassment that we have 1 billion people across the globe in poverty at the current time. And that threshold for poverty on a global level is extremely low. We're not talking about a very high bar. You know, the standards, which are correct standards, but standards which are easy to be judged to, you know, if you are in an affluent country like ours, we don't contribute much to that global total. There's a global perspective, and yet 1 billion people at the very lowest standards are now going to be into poverty. In Scotland, we have our own scale of a challenge, and it should not be underestimated. Almost 250,000 children, interestingly, 2/3 of them in a household where a parent does some work. The majority of Scotland's poverty is a working household poverty these days, and I think that speaks to something about solutions and why we need different types of solutions than the ones that are currently being suggested. And it's bad news that this chart is before coronavirus is factored in. We were already in a negative trend. We might have good aspirations and the right ambitions as a country here in Scotland to eradicate child poverty, but the reality is the trends were adverse. They were negative trends. In the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a steady increase in the proportion of our children. Just thinking about children, and there are significant challenges for working adults and for pensioners too, but for children it was beginning to increase. Then comes along coronavirus, and we know that that's going to ratchet up more. It's going to do two things. It's going to mean that those that were in poverty are going to feel it more intensely, and it means that more people are going to be living in poverty. Two different challenges, and I think we should see them as two different challenges, both equally worthy of dealing with, but two different challenges nevertheless. So what is ahead then? There is that tough times perspective that I'm giving you there, but there's also some optimism, I think. And the optimism here is in the shape of the Child Poverty Act 2017 in Scotland. So we are committed as a nation to try to eradicate child poverty within a decade by 2030. That's our ambition. And I think an interesting point for tonight is that each one of Scotland's 32 local authorities has to articulate their local plan. So on your doorstep, your local authority, in conjunction with the local health board, has to articulate a local strategy to do what it can do locally to make a difference, a contribution towards that national ambition of eradicating child poverty. Now, there's lots of techie bits in the background about what that means, but I think the long and short of it means there's a national programme of action and there's a local programme of action. Brings us close to what we're interested tonight. This is a framework that your local area, all 32 local areas in Scotland, have been asked to kind of consider and to not been forced to frame their local strategy around this, but to consider about whether or not these are the types of issues locally that they should be using resource to address, to increase income from employment, to reduce the costs of living, and to ensure that income is maximised from social security or benefits in kind. And if we think about what Revolution for Good can do, it certainly factors into the costs of living and income and benefits in kind. It's making a difference to how much money we have and how far that will go. It might not always be able to put more pounds and pence in somebody's pocket, but it will make the pounds and pence in somebody's pocket go a little bit further. It'll make it work more effectively. And I firmly believe that's got to be a core focus for community strategies, is tackling the worst excesses of poverty and supporting people to realise what they can within the resources that they have. So these are the types of things locally that the priorities are being focused on. And we might think it's not quite there yet, and I think it's worth having those conversations, but we should be thinking locally as well as nationally at the current time. These are the kind of numbers that are maybe a year out of date, but the point I want to make from this, and I've highlighted Moray. I feel bad that I've not highlighted Inverclyde and East Wren, given that I'm not just speaking to a Moray audience. But the point I'd make from this is, yes, it's more intense in Glasgow, and that will come as no surprise to anybody. But every single part of Scotland, every single one of our 32 local authority areas has got at least 1 in 10 children living in poverty at the current time. So all of them are above the target where we want to be in 2030, some of them quite significantly so. So let not anybody tell you that it's not an issue on your doorstep. If you're in a more affluent part of Scotland, and Moray might, be on the more affluent side, and certainly East Renfrewshire is undoubtedly in the more affluent side, but it's still an issue. That the children that experience poverty in an affluent area are equally deserving of support as those that experience poverty in an area that is much more intense and much more prevalent. But the strategies have to be different. What it means to be in poverty and also what it means to tackle that poverty are different from place to place. Again, a community perspective becomes important. It can't be a one size fits all. We have to have local solutions we've got to make a contribution to. So what's the scale of that local challenge then? Well, again, this just picks up in Renfrewshire. and shows you that within one area in Scotland, Renfrewshire doesn't, you know, rank that highly. It's somewhere about the middle in terms of a league table of how many children live in poverty. But within Renfrewshire, you've got areas that have extremely high rates of child poverty. You know, Renfrew South and Gallow Hill, which is one part of an urban part, large town part, 1 in 3 kids in that part of that authority are living in poverty. But you've also got some very affluent parts. You can get down to Bishopton, Bridge of Weir and Langbank, where it's just over 1 in 10. So there's incredible diversity within our local authorities. And the point I'd make from this, which I'm sure is familiar to you, you can think of your own area and you could have your equivalents on your doorstep. But the point I take from this is it's not enough to have a local authority strategy, because there's such diversity within local authorities. We really need something that's more focused in different parts of authorities. It's got to have a community dimension to that. And that might even be not at the level of, you know, pulling together everybody in Renfrew South and Gallow Hill. We have to have a local dimension that addresses the nature of these challenges. I would emphasise the 10% of kids in Bishopton, Bridge of Weir and Langbank are equally worthy of something being done to support them as the 1 in 3 kids in Paisley and in Renfrew South, but it'll be a different type of strategy that's required in those areas. The point I'm making, we need a community focus. It needs to complement what else is going on nationally and perhaps at the level of local authority, but we do need a community sensitivity if we're going to address the problems that poverty presents. These are the maps from what's known as the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. It'll be known to many of you. It doesn't serve rural areas particularly well, but again, it re-emphasises that point about there's incredible local diversity. We need a local intelligence if we're going to have solutions. That means listening to people locally. It means working with local resources and marshalling them to address the problems. The colour scheme that we get in the SIMD maps is, you know, the darker the red, the more deprivation, the deeper the blue, the less deprivation there is. And it just shows you the incredible diversity we have within towns. You know, be it Paisley, some very affluent parts of Paisley if we move towards the border in Glasgow and Ralston, and some deeply entrenched poverty in areas such as Fergusley Park. And cheek by jowl, sometimes we have poverty and affluence sitting next together. And it's evident not just in the large urban areas, but in some of the smaller urban areas as well, we get these problems. And it's not just in West Central Scotland. If we look at Elgin, broadly seen to be an affluent town. Yes, there's more blue. There is more areas in Elgin that have less deprivation, but there's also some pockets. There's also some parts of Elgin then where deprivation is something that's more common. And that local intelligence is important. We can't have a Murray strategy, never mind an Elgin strategy. We have to think not only and exclusively, but we have to have a community dimension if we're going to address the problem too. Also the case in Forres as well. You know, cheek by jowl, very affluent areas and less affluent areas sitting side by side. So again, re-emphasising that point I want to make, we need a community perspective, and I don't think it's there yet. I think we have a sense of national ambition. We want to eradicate child poverty by 2030, and we have other objectives in terms of food security and in terms of fuel. We now have local strategies, well, what are called local strategies, but are local authority strategies. But I think we need a community focus as well. Now, that might be community geographical, but it also might be communities of interest, you know, groups then that share same characteristics across diverse geographical areas. It's not that it's not there. It's not that nobody's thinking about it. You know, community organisations think about these things, but I think it has to be more important and a bigger player if we're going to tackle poverty going forward. So what the kind of concluding points or the things I want to leave you with, five thoughts then for a local perspective, a community perspective. The point I would make right away that I don't think it's inevitable poverty. I don't think it's, you know, complex abstract systems, you know, it's the hidden hand of the capitalist powers that are solely responsible for it, and they might have a degree of responsibility. I don't blame people largely for the poverty that they experience. There might be a degree of personal responsibility. I don't think we can say it's not an issue, but it's not a thing that our focus has got to be. And our focus has got to be that what we're doing isn't working. You know, we're maybe not directing enough resource, but also how we're using that resource hasn't been as effective as we want it to be. And therefore we need new types of solutions. We need to be doing things differently. We need to be thinking about long-standing investments, and if they're not working, shifting that spend to others that are. And therefore, you know, initiatives such as we're talking tonight are part of that mix. Not every new initiative will work. And I think that's fine. I think we've got to be prepared to try new things, because if we're just going to do the same old, we're not going to make the transformative difference that we want. So we have to think about what we have and make that work more effectively. Realistically, though, we have to shift more resource as well. It's a combination of both. Make it work better, but have a level of resource that allows us at least to stand a fighting chance of making a difference. And I see that as a vision of an optimist. I think we can do something. You know, I'm not throwing my hands up and saying, look, it's never going to work because the big abstract powers of capital are going to keep us poor. I'm not blaming individuals because they'll always be feckless. I'm saying there is things we can do, and I think we're duty bound to do that. That's the first point I would take away. Secondly, is we need to really problematise work, and we have to have an idea about how work works for everybody in society. You know, when you get 2/3 of kids in Scotland who are in poverty living in a household where somebody works, that tells you that work isn't a simple solution to poverty. It is absolutely important. You know, it's got to be core to the strategy, but the way that work's rewards are being distributed now are not serving as well. Far too many children in working households are living in poverty. Now, that's partly because there's insecurity in work. We're not sure week to weeks in some households how much work we're getting. In some cases, it's the simply work is not paying enough. You know, the national minimum wage isn't enough, and the national living wage is not widely enough used by employers to enable the possibility of having work escaping families from poverty. But whatever, we need a new vision for work, whether that means something much more radical about citizens' incomes and top-ups, or much more flexibility, harmonisation of income. There's lots of things that could be done, but I think until we face up to that, we do have a real problem, because the nature of work is probably going to be something similar to what we've had in the past. You know, we're not going to go back to the days of, you know, full employment and large scale employment by public sector organisations. I think we have to face up to that reality, and I think we have to think about how we can make sure that work does pay. Because I think just now what's been dealt to many people is the peddling a myth. You know, that you work hard, train hard, get yourself an income, get yourself out of poverty, and it's not that simple, and it's not the reality for far too many. So work has to do better, has to serve us better going forward. I think we heard from Debbie about lived experience, and she said as well as her own personal experience, one of the drivers then for what we're talking about tonight was that talking to parents based on the work and what they were looking to. And I think we're getting there. We're getting there, that lived experience is becoming more important, and not in a patronising way, in a way that's genuine, in a way that genuinely believes that better solutions, the right solutions and the right focus come about by listening to people and responding to that. And I think more and more of our large public bodies are taking more seriously lived experience. Now, they're not all there. I wouldn't pretend that they are, but there's an appetite for it, and there's good practice emerging. And I think when that appetite and good practice emerges, then there'll be more of it, and there'll be more interesting and different and complementary solutions coming forward. And I think the community dimension's not quite there yet with this. I think that's quite interesting, because a lot of the engaging lived experience is the national bodies wanting to know what lived experience is to inform their action, or the local authority wanting to know what lived experience is to inform their action. I think we need much more of a lived experience focus locally amongst communities as well, not just to service the kind of broad national aims we've got, or the broader local authority aims, but thinking about locally community, what those priorities are. There's little bits of, you know, roots and shoots of optimism there. You can think about participatory budgeting, for example, as perhaps an example of something that's letting resource follow where priorities are, but there's not enough of it. More of it has to happen. But I think we're moving in the right direction. There's a cause for optimism. Communities of interest, you know, and this is a point about, it's not just about a geographical community. There are sectors then that are doing things, and I always look at education, because I think there's been some really good things going on in education, despite all the crises of the summer and the failures of, you know, how we didn't quite wake up to the realities of what coronavirus meant for families studying at home, and the exams crisis. We know there are problems. However, in terms of the sector and the professionals thinking about their practice, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. The union, the EIS, has a PACT project, which is looking at what the teachers and other educational professionals can do on a day-to-day basis to tackle poverty incidentally in the classroom and in their educational environments. The cost of the school day projects has been probably one of our sterling successes, to get schools to look at the hidden costs of schooling and then do what they can to tackle that. Now, while there are problems in education, I'm not going to say it's all rosy glow. To me, that's a good sign of a professional group thinking, right, what can we do? And there needs to be more of that. There needs to be much more thinking about, right, what can we do as leisure-centred professionals to ensure that the barriers to child poverty are not holding people back. Are uniformed organisations as well, perhaps? You know, are they really truly open to all children? Does the couple of pounds is required a week and the incidental cost, does that bar too many people from taking part in other ways we can get around that? I think those types of conversations need to be happening more often amongst different communities of interest. Education have made a start. I think others should follow. And finally, then, I mean, food is something that, you know, I know Murray's done a lot of good work in food, and I think one thing optimistically is that it's now part of the national agenda. We as a country have, for the last few years, estimated food insecurity in our country as something that's a national indicator that we're holding ourselves to account for. 3 different measures in the Scottish Health Survey, giving a national sense of is there food insecurity in Scotland? Are people over the last 12 months worried they'll run out of food? Have they ate less because they don't have the money? Have they actually ran out of food? 3 different scales of food insecurity. Again, it's not good results. I mean, it's suggesting there that 1/4 of single parents at some stage over the year are worried they would run out of food, and more than 1 in 10 single parent families report running out of food over the last 12 months. So there's certainly problems to address, but the fact we're thinking about it, I think, is good. And you know, I think the response to the Scottish Government to bring in that support just announced this week for children over the school holidays, which hasn't been followed down south, give you a sense of a different pathway we're on. I'm not being party political here. I'm not making that point. The point I want to make is we do seem to be making some decisions and making the right priorities in Scotland. More of it needs to happen. But the concluding point I want to make then is really there is space for community. There's a lot of good work going on nationally. There's a good sense of purpose and an aspiration, I think, that does Scotland proud. Not enough has been done to realise that aspiration, to achieve that. Much more will have to be done. But I think there's a lot of space for projects such as we're talking tonight and strengthen that community focus more generally. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, John, and thank you very much for that. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions afterwards, and I'm just going to pass on to Kevin. So welcome Kevin Neary, who is a co-founder of Aid and Abet, which is a charity that offers support to offenders leaving prison in Edinburgh and the Lothians. Aid and Abet work to peer support principles and believe that, you know, that they can support people, support one another in the community. So I'll just hand you over to Kevin, who's kind of going to tell you a wee bit about, I suppose, his story and poverty in the community.
Thanks, Davy. Thanks for being invited along tonight, and thanks, John, for that wonderful presentation and the slides that were included. And I've seen that people were asking to get copies of that slide because we need that evidence and we need that. So thanks for that, Davy. Thanks for sharing so honestly about your own personal background. It was very powerful. It's a difficult thing to do when you talk about how our past is, but it's a form of recovery, and we can venture back there before it creating any pain. So thanks so much for that, and I so much identified with that story, which saves me talking a lot about what happened in my childhood, because there were so many similarities, and which led into me going on a journey into the criminal justice system and drug addiction and behaviour, which for 30 years, that took me there, which then took me on a journey to creating a charity, Aid and Abet. However, I'm not going to really talk about Aid and Abet as in like what we do. In that sense, we do support through lived experience, support people coming to prison and to show them better paths and to build better relationships and stuff. So just to hit on what John was saying and what you were saying, and a lot of stuff you spoke about as well was ACEs and childhood trauma, which was mentioned, and John spoke about the levels of poverty, within all areas of Scotland and all over really. I was looking at John's maps and what was shown there in central Scotland and then over places like Moray and places up north. You know, places up north like Moray, and a lot of Scotland has beautiful scenery, beautiful venues. Within it, there's a lot of emotional pain, which results through the state of poverty. And when we talk about poverty, we're talking about poverty impoverished and not getting enough of. And what I see through poverty is, you know, the ability to love. Because you know, through poverty, when families are stressed under the lack of provisions, single families, I noticed on the slide there, single families, single parents with the highest number there on John's slides. You worry, stress, worrying if they're going to eat again, worry if they're going to do that. So for a single parent to go through that and constantly worry and struggle and find ways to make ends meet is stress. And what happens through that, right, is the impoverished part comes in, is lack of love comes in, because the care you want for your kids and worrying you don't have time for them. And that's called, in my eyes, it's unintentional neglect, because nobody's intentionally neglecting their child in any sense. However, due to the circumstances that people live in the day, you know, that they so much have caught up with what's happening in society, that sometimes kids are left, and it's no intentional. I come from a background where it was like that, you know, and I talk about attachment to my parents, and I talk about being brought up, you know, poor, and how you know that I could use blame, and I could blame my mum, or I could blame my dad, or I could blame, but there were so many factors that came into play that brought poverty, and it wasn't just through poverty through the clothes or the food that I was eating, but being limited to love and connection, which was a society and economical factor. And I think John's you know, pictures there, you know, just showed that. You know, when I was looking at John's pictures, I was looking at all the red areas, you know, and I was saying, you know, you could criminal justice and all that stuff could go into the exact same mapped areas and see the high level of crime. You know, the high level of premature death and suicide and mental health is all within the same areas. You know, and that's where my passion comes in. And there is I work in a preventative role today, you know, because as aid and abet, you know, my job is to, you know, when I go to prison, you know, my dream was to just, you know, get a new life and you know, get a job and get that the basic, you know, get a job, get a house, get a relationship, and do all that stuff, and that dream was wasted within 72 hours, and so was many other guys who walked through the gates of prison, because stress happened, because all my needs were met in prison. See, my breakfast, lunch, and dinner was provided. You know, my washing was done for me. So much so that I didn't know how to make my breakfast. You know what I mean? Because it was made for me. Lunch and dinner. You know, I didn't have a key to a door because it was open for me. I didn't worry about electricity or gas or TV license or none of that stuff, because my needs were all met in prison. And when I came out of prison, I'm under total stress instantly because I need to provide all that now. And that was the whole point of Aid and Abet, was because we wanted to limit that stress, you know, reduce that stress in somebody's life to get them through that first 72 hours. Most people do return back to prison. But then when I got the opportunity at preventative work, and that work was preventing people going into the criminal justice system, preventing people prisons, accident, emergency, mortuaries, you know, young offenders institutions, you know, that I got that opportunity, and where I worked with that's when I came across, you know, the understanding of the science of the trauma, and where trauma is affecting not just the individual, but society all over, you know, and how we as a community. So community is about coming together and giving, you know, and understanding that's what community means. It means we come together and we give to each other, you know, but that can be prevented when a community is put under stress through economical and other situations in life that happens, you know. But you know, that being connected and having a relationship with other people, especially your kids, but other people in your community, and how people work together. And COVID has also been a negative, but as much as being a positive, because I've never seen so much people come together in the community through the result of COVID, which has been pretty powerful. sadly, so many people have died, and it's limited, and people have lost their livelihoods, and people are losing so much. But out of that comes the strength of the community. That I see today. And the bottom line for me is the route to poverty and the route to is togetherness. But when you go up the route of a plant, you get to the top of it. That flowers. Some people may disagree with what I'm going to say here, but what lies there is decision makers and systems and government. They sit at the top of all that decision making. If we really want to talk about community and investing in our children and investing in our people, and because we're in the state of COVID right now, the people are fighting to sustain employment and sustain people's companies and all that stuff, and little do they realise that in the future they might not even have an employee to come in because so many people will suffer mental health and so much stuff through the result of that. So for me, being here tonight, I'm quite passionate about our future, our children who are our future, first ministers and doctors and teachers and lawyers and construction workers and educators, and all that. That's our future, and that's where investment needs really put forward, and it's difficult, I suppose, for any decision maker through COVID, that how do they sort this through such an unprecedented virus which is affecting all sorts. So we can't put blame on anything, but we can also find solutions. And for me, that solutions are more in community and how communities can work closer together. I don't think we'll ever get rid of it in any sense whatsoever. I subdued my emotional pain with drugs. I took substances to subdue my emotional pain, and that was why I was a drug addict for years. I didn't know that. I lost who I was for years, through the result of the situation, whether it be in the household or what was happening with family. I was never physically abused, but I was mentally tortured through other people's behaviours and actions, which led into that, losing myself. And I always talked about when I was a young guy at school, and I wanted to walk like him, talk like him, act like him, and be everybody else but me. And I always wanted to be somebody else. And when we talk about recovered, when we talk about recovered, it's when you recover something, you're recovering something that was lost, and they recover me. And what I feel today is some young people, and especially kids, are getting lost in society through poverty. And as I say, it's not just poverty through the lack of food, the lack of employment. I believe that I was speaking to Hamza Yusuf one time, and he asked me what I felt should be needed. And I said, a wraparound for every single parent in the country, reduce the stress and allow the mother to love her child. The first 1,000 days in a child's life is the most important 1,000 days. That's 3 years, right? Some mothers have not got the ability, not because they've not got the ability, they're restricted because of the demands on them in life, because they've got to provide, they've got to work, they've got to go out and do 2 jobs and stuff like that. And I say single parents, I mean male and female in that sense, you know what I mean? But majority are mothers, that are having to work hard, to go and provide and work hard under stress and pressure. And they lose the ability to love a child. And then they wonder why the child then goes and attaches to somebody else because they need attention. And they attach to another peer group as they get older. So there's a lot of that involved. So when I talk about poverty, I talk about love poverty, which is the root cause of various other factors which will cause that, whether it be through, finances and stuff, and my solution is relationship. And the most important way is if a mother can have a relationship with her child, if a family can have a relationship with their children, if children can have a relationship with their friends and get that, then and you know, we become a bit rich in life. You know, we may be hungry, but we can love. You know, and that's where I go with that. I was planning on coming here and talking about aid and abet and all the successful things we do and all that stuff, but why wait till they get there when we can prevent it? Because you know, aid and abet pick it up after the damage is done. But at the same time, we're working in early intervention and prevention, and that's to prevent it happening, so that aid and abet doesn't pick people up coming out of prison. Most people who are in the criminal justice system and in addiction will tell Debbie's story, will tell my story, you know, and tell countless other stories. And I'm sure people here tonight will identify through lived experience. And I don't like the lived experience logo, actually, because we all have lived experience, no matter where you've come from. We've all experienced some sort of adversity, whether it be through various situations that can happen in life. So I think that we all have lived experience, and we need to use that experience to support others. So no, I don't like the word lived experience, because it sort of pigeonholes and puts it in a category where it's people in the criminal justice system and drug addiction and trauma stuff. You know, I think we've all experienced various types of traumas in our lives, various situations that scared us, and what may be traumatic to me may not be traumatic to you, and what stresses me may not stress you. But what is the solution is where I'm connected, and it's that connection that really matters. So yeah, I would really like to end on a positive, and I think the positive is community. Going back to the when we come together, we give, and it doesn't need to be material. We give. It's maybe just listening, being there, caring, a form of compassion, kindness, love. And I talk about love a lot because love's action. You know, love's action. You know, when you act towards helping another human being in any means, it's love, and that's my you know, way today. You know, an ounce of prevention is better than an ounce of cure. You know, and that's where I come from. So, Debbie, thanks for inviting me onto this tonight. Thanks for sharing your story. John, thanks for the slides. You know, I could spend all night talking about these slides, because we could fit these slides, because you would fit them right into every factor, single parent, impoverished areas, criminal justice, drug addiction, mental health, and it all comes down and everything relates back to poverty. I hope what I've said makes a wee bit of sense to some people tonight, and I hope it makes that you know, coming together, being a community, does matter and brings strength. So thanks for letting me speak with you tonight. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. And thanks, John. You know, these are both an inspiration, and I really like the fact that that you talked about love, Kevin. It's a huge part of what Revolution is all about. It's kind of in our logo, and it's what it needs to be based on. And you know, John talked about the community, and how that it's there. It's got to be part of it. You know, and I'm really excited by it. I think that he's right. There's kind of an appetite that's happening, and it is kind of moving in that direction, and that really excites me. I think that more and more the local authorities are certainly kind of seeing that's where we're going, and COVID has shown that if you take all of the politics and the politicians out of the scenario, you can easily get the community together, and the community can work together. I think it has been shown right across Scotland. So I'm just going to open it up and ask if anybody's got any questions or anything that they want to ask John or Kevin or me about Revolution. Or go, Sandra. You need to unmute though.
Hiya. I came here tonight to listen and to try and catch on, because And the more I'm listening to all this, I realise, I think if anybody missed that, I run Back to School Bank in East Renfrewshire. And I think really we just we're firefighting. What we're doing is firefighting. We're not even aiming to look at the root cause. It's not our job. It's not what we're aiming to do. We don't care what the background of the parents are. We don't care what's happened with any, why they're poor, why anybody that can't afford it. We go by referrers who come to us, and they do the due diligence. They say they need whatever they need, and we give it to them. It's that straightforward. Or we make all the efforts to get the money in, or the sponsors, or whatever we've got to do with the local supermarkets. That's me. I'm the prize moocher. So I go around getting all that together to pull that together. And we are really just firefighting. But recently, as everybody's talking about COVID, it is one of the things that's made me think very much about this. Even only tonight, I was having a conversation with somebody, and we're talking about this is everybody starting now with the Christmas presents and getting everything ready for Christmas and what everybody's doing for kids for Halloween. And we go into winter, as Debbie's already talked about, winter warmers. We make sure the kids have all got warm coats and boots and hats and gloves, because they don't get dropped off at school. They walk to school from wherever they live in all weathers. And we were talking about this tonight. And in East Renfrewshire, it's an affluent area, but it obviously has its pockets. I mean, we do some, like the biggest city in Edinburgh, and I think you do too, Debbie, about 500-600 referrals a year as far as Back to School Bank's concerned. We do over 200 in that tiny hamlet of East Renfrewshire, half of which is the only bit that's really the very the side that struggles, although more and more of it is creeping in. So when we were talking earlier tonight about all this kind of thing, I've started to realise that, and we do work with participatory budgeting people and the linked communities people in East Renfrewshire, and there was a recent fundraiser, a couple of years ago, it was a fundraiser, and there were 62 different outfits there who were, caregivers in the community, or tiny wee groups of people that tried to help. 62 that had applied for different funding in this one area. So we're all firefighting, we're all doing this bit together, and they're doing linked communities, which brings us all together as far as fundraising maybe is concerned. But as I listen to this, it's not joined up enough. And this is what you're making me think, that every single one of us involved in all these communities, we tap into each other. But that is it. Really, we're all in our own bubble, firefighting. And these root causes, well, the root cause, we always just look at it as poverty. Poverty is the root cause why people are coming to Back to School Bank. It's just getting to grips with that. But could we do more? And it's making me now want to go into the community and speak to the people I know. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know what it is I'm going to say, but it takes a group effort, I think, that's going to get everybody around the table to be able to decide how we can deal with it as a community. And also we just keep people's dignity. The great big thing about Back to School Bank is that we let people keep their dignity, because we don't know, everybody's anonymous to us. We don't speak to people on a one-to-one basis, or families like you do, Debbie, because that was the whole reason, that was the whole the very fabric of Back to School Bank was started up, that it was completely anonymous. Because what I say is, these people could live next door to you. So we don't know who they are. The referrers know who they are. It's all we need to know. And we go on from there. But listening to all that's really, I've got what I came here for tonight, just to hear what we can tag it. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know what we can do, but you've made me think it's time we did all pull together. And I know people in the council, they're my friends. I've got friends in the council, I've got politicians who are friends. And it's time we all pulled ourselves together to say, okay, what do we do in this community? Because we start inside, don't we? And work our way out. And then that's the way everything sort of sorts itself. And if we can do that in this community, it's a bit like people talk about in Norway, they have hills, they use all of Norway, hills and dales, and they've got a village and a police station and a fire station and a clinic and a chemist, and then you go to the next Hillendale and they'll get that. So it's all this. If we can all work within our communities, the whole country benefits. In every single the 32 constituencies that there are, constituent parts of Scotland. So thank you very much for all the stuff that I've listened to tonight, and I'll follow it up. And I won't let you go, Debbie. I'll be on your door, knocking your door.
Thanks,
And
Sandra.
thanks for sharing all that. That was, I mean, you know, I've chatted infrequently, but that's fair. I always have much admiration for, because I see all the stuff you do, and all within the family. So, wow.
Thank you.
Stuff. And thanks to the other speakers as well, because I've picked up an awful lot from that. But you've got me going. You've got me going.
Good stuff.
I'll see where it goes from there. Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions? No. Not a single person got any questions. Sue, have you got a question? Oh, hold on a minute. I saw you, Norma. I'll come back to you in a wee minute. Sue, you can go.
Oi, I'm listening and it's moving me. And this is really to John and to Debbie. What do you do with your rage when you're immersed in this stuff? The firefighting and there's passion, but what do you do with your anger and your rage about it all?
Do you want to go first, John?
You know, I've never thought of that before, actually. I just probably revert to type, you know, and then I kind of, what I do is small, you know, what I do is like broad brush, but I realise it's part of the mix, and I realise that it serves a useful purpose in supporting others that are doing the work at the coalface, or in pushing policymakers to try and make decisions that are going to lead to a better society. So it's always a kind of middle ground that I tread. When I get angry at things that I hear in the telly, it just makes me do more of what I already do. I don't feel overwhelmed by it. I think maybe I'm lucky that I don't feel overwhelmed, and I'm certainly not complacent about that. But I think it's also, it means I'm a bit more productive in terms of the limited contributions that I can make. I keep making them. I mean, the only time I can remember been really angry about something, really angry, was in 2016 when word came out that the UK government were going to withdraw from their commitments in the 2010 Child Poverty Act. So in 2016 they announced that they were taking a different tack. They weren't going to be holding themselves to account to eradicate child poverty by 2020. I was on holiday at the time. And I wrote a blog, which is not something I do a lot of. You know, I probably should do a lot more of it, but I don't do a lot of it. And that was my way of coping. It was just reverting to type. It was well received, misunderstood by a few, because I used a kind of headline that made it seem as if I was supporting what they were doing as a way to criticise, you know, almost to get attention and then punch them from the side. But that's what I kind of do. I just do more of what I already do. But I realise that's just a very small part of what's required to be done.
Thanks, John. I would say that that I do that too. It gives me more passion, I suppose, and a wee bit more determination. And I shout at Brian, who's not got his camera on, so but he is here listening. But yeah, generally he gets it in the neck, so yeah. And for those of you that know me and know how much of a weirdo I am, when I'm stressed and things like that bother me, I just have a big sniff in of my dog because I love the smell of dog. It's really sad. I think that because things like that bother me all the time. I was really annoyed yesterday when, you know, when they voted in England to not provide school meals in the holidays. I was so angry. It just really winds me up. There's so many things, and I think what I really do is I get that anger out in my home where I can't be judged and I can do and say whatever I like. But it gives me a wee bit more fire in my belly. Kevin, do you want to answer that? Because you know, I would imagine you've got a response to that as well.
Yeah, you know, I suppose we all get angry at times when decisions are made. What I didn't point out when I was speaking there was I actually work with police. I work with Police Scotland and early intervention and prevention of young people, and that's why I get so passionate about why I do my job today. So we've reduced offending in the young people that work with by 70%. We've saved the government over £8.5 million in costs through crime, using lived experience working alongside police officers, rather than locking young people up and putting them in jail. We prevent them going to prison, and we help build bridges to better futures for the young people. I do get very frustrated at times, but I've realised today that the more we fight against anything, it just gets bigger. You know, we you know, fight the war against drugs got bigger, the war against crime gets bigger, the war against terrorism gets bigger. In fact, even the fight against infection, antibiotics don't fight because it gets bigger and bigger, and it's about working with solutions. You know, so for me, I don't allow that kind of pain to bother me. I do what as Debbie just said there. You know, I just try and keep pushing forward, keep pushing my agenda through across, and take risks. You know, I take risks every day. I don't get too comfortable. I get uncomfortable with people, and I put my agenda across. So, in a nice assertive way, it may upset them, but as long as it's not upsetting me, I'm quite happy to do that. But I suppose it's not about getting angry, and it's not about, for me personally, just you know, I can't go about life being angry anymore. It's more about what I can do to contribute to society, contribute to other lives. You know what I mean, and prevent pain and misery as best I can. So that's the best answer I can give.
Thanks, Kevin. Does that answer your question, Sue? So Norma, you had your hand up. Pass you back to Norma. I'll come back to you, Sandra.
It wasn't really a question or it was just really, I think, on the point that Sandra was making earlier on about how we're all kind of firefighting and whatnot. And I'm from a council service that provides benefits, and I've been doing that for like 30 years. So you know, I've kind of seen welfare reforms insides and out, all different ways. And I think our services evolved to income maximisation and money, you know, so debt management and things like that, Scottish Welfare Fund and all of these things that are there. And a lot of that sort of the financial things does come down to, you know, education. And I don't just mean, you know, education of young people. I'm talking, you know, supporting, you know, adults and educating adults about what they can access. And that's one of the things that, you know, that we can do. I mean, I would love to change the welfare system. It's, you know, it's a big problem, but not being able to do that, you know, it is about trying to educate people what's available to them to get, and other things like, you know, don't touch payday loans with the barcode, because there's other solutions out there for people. So it's about educating people about what is available for them to access. But I think one of the things that you were talking about as well is about that kind of emotional support. And I mean, my services work with a lot of people, you know, with financial issues, but they've also got, you know, mental health issues and drug and alcohol, and sometimes it doesn't matter what, you know, you're telling the same people over and over and again about similar things, because they haven't got that emotional stability in their life at that moment in time to really absorb what's going on, and often can go from sort of one crisis to another. So I think that having that kind of peer support is really important. And I think it does kind of come down to wherever the support may be, it's about letting people know that it is available and that people don't have to be on their own, that there's something there. And I think that firefighting thing about, you know, the reactionary thing, it is about educating e-groups and people about what all the support is available out there. and making sure that they tap into that. And you know, some of these groups, you know, being able to provide a bit of peer support for people, so that people don't feel, you know, so vulnerable, that they feel so alone and isolated, that they get to such desperate situations. My service often sees people who are at the end of their rope, whose their circumstances could have been improved a lot earlier, you know, on that journey. But sometimes it takes them to hit rock bottom before they're so desperate. So, you know, early intervention, educating people about what is there in their community, trying to help support people to make their own decisions as well. Again, coming back to things like payday loans and not touching with barge poles and things like that. You know, there's easier way to access credit. Everybody needs credit at some point in their life. So it's not that it's a bad thing, but it's just what's the best fit for them as well. And I would totally echo what I think Kevin said earlier on about you know, the young sort of parents with young kids, and you know how much there's so much pressure on them just now, you know, that they have to, you know, they have to do everything. They have to be the best parent, they have to be the provider, they have to work because they won't get their benefits, or their benefits are limited. And you know, that obviously does have an effect on, you know, how it can have an effect on how kids grow up. And you know, and sometimes if it's not, you know, neglect in terms of poverty, the emotional neglect, and that just seeps in, as we talked about earlier on, about how that seeps into adulthood and affects, you know, adults in all different kind of ways. So there's no magic wand unfortunately for any of this, but you know, trying to be more joined up is really important to do that. And I think trying not to be in our own little bubbles and working in our own silos, we have to kind of really try to work across the way and try to support people, you know, with, you know, when we're having, I think the NHS is I can't remember if they've got something that they call it's making every moment count or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But it is really doing that. It's when you're having a conversation with somebody, you know, is trying to make that really count with them. And even if you are not the person that can help with their problems, you know, that you know somebody else who can do that. But even just building a little bit of relationship with that person, that they maybe feel a little bit of trust with you, because that goes a long way as well. Sorry, I'll stop talking now.
Thanks, Norma. Making every opportunity count, that's what you're thinking of. And you know, it's so true. And it's really exciting that you're right, you can't fix all of it, and kind of there's no magic wand, but you know, doing a wee bit at a time, and just supporting one family at a time, being able to help them kind of make that better, and that collaboration. So being able to work together, it's really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to it. Sandra had her hand up first, then I'll come to Alice.
Really just wanted to say again, somebody had mentioned, you know, how do we manage to get all these groups together, different groups that are in it, and I don't know, but what I do know is you do have a person that will be the driver, that will make the effort, because we all can talk about it, and we all talk in different group formats, so but then we meet up together and you discuss things, but you need to be, somebody needs to keep pushing it, because we've all got so much to do, everybody's spinning plates, and it just takes somebody, and I'm going to do that, and that's what's going to happen with us. I'm going to think of all the people. When I started Back to School Bank, it was one of these nuggets, middle of the night ideas that came up, and it was literally a nugget. I thought, why can't we do what food banks do, and people who are shopping for school uniform? And I'm in the middle of a story. The reason Back to School Bank started was because I found out that these Christmas gift things, you know, where people, they called it the Jessie tree, and people would take a card, buy a Christmas gift for a child, wrap it up. They still do all that kind of thing. But my daughter's a school teacher, and she had helped out one of her colleagues with it, and she was doing the shopping for it, and I was with her, and she was buying bits of school uniform, and they were going to be wrapped up as Christmas presents and left for kids because that's what was deemed needed. So a 12-year-old boy was going to open up on Christmas morning a parcel that there was a pair of school trousers, and I found that so upsetting. And it really was one of those middle of the night things in your bed. I thought, well, why can't the way food banks work, that we can pick up bits for a skirt or whatever, an extra cardigan, when you're getting your own school uniforms for your children. Now that was the seed that was sown, and I started to say to people, I've got a wee idea, and you would talk to somebody else about it, talk to somebody else, and talk at groups and things, and then you start to think, who could help me with this? So you think of all the people you know that you'd be able to say, would you like to come in and help me, because you know you would be good at that thing and you would be good at that. You actually handpick all the people that you bring around you, and then other people get the idea, they think, well, this is a good idea, so they all start doing it and you pull it in. And that's how Back to School Bank came, because you have an idea and you don't just think about it and dream about it, you make it happen. And that's what I did. And I'm so glad I came to this tonight, because this has made me think, right, and I really had this conversation 2 or 3 years ago with somebody saying, right, that's the Christmas thing going, what can we do because of COVID, how can we store things? We're not doing it, but we're part of it. But it's making me think now, right, there's more to it than that now. We need to start thinking about next year and through Christmas. And we already know the families are going to try to feed themselves all through Christmas. That's hopefully being kind of sorted, but there'll be more to it than that. So it's got me going now. So now I'm actually going to make it happen. I'm actually going to get all these people that I know together and see, because we do have it's called Linked Communities, and it's very good. But I think, unless I'm missing out, they're all doing it and I'm the one sitting outside missing out on it. But I'm going to get a hold of these people and see what else we can do, actually an action plan, and see what we can pull together, because there's a hell of a lot of clever people out there that are doing lots on their own. And I wonder if we can tie up with each other, if we can have that kind of connection with each other. I know out in North Lanarkshire, they seem to have something very well connected, that if somebody walked into Money Matters or whatever, they're already with the connections between there and there, because they listen to them, or Citizens Advice, and they pull all that together. It's quite specific how they work. Maybe we need to start looking at that. Maybe, as I say, maybe things like that do happen, but I don't know about it, and I'm still sitting doing the firefighting. So I'm going to go out there and get it started. But I think that's all it takes, is just don't talk about it. Let's just
do it.
Let's go and do
Thanks, Sandra.
And I'll not butt in again. I'll let
School.
I'm a bladder.
Alice.
Hi, I would just like to say thank you to everyone who has spoken today. Yeah, it's been fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And I love your excitement, Sandra. That is just so good. Here in Inverclyde, in my current workplace, I've been there now it'll be 18 years next year, a long time. And what I've watched is lots of different initiatives being set up, and more initiatives being set up. And they can be great initiatives, but often they're not necessarily short term, but they're dealing with an immediate need. Probably over COVID, I've probably seen that happen really quickly. People accessing money, getting together, see that community effort without the statutory bodies, without people giving you permission. That was pretty amazing. But over the last easily 10 years, what we have seen is lots and lots and lots of projects and initiatives starting up that are short term, meaning they look after people's immediate needs, but we're doing nothing about the medium and long term solutions to enable people to try and move or undo the poverty, or try and eliminate it in some kind of way. and I'm never great at remembering things, but there was a really good NHS paper, and it was undo, mitigate, and there was another word, and I've got it in a document somewhere, but I'm sorry, words just disappear. And it was, we listened to Norma there, and Norma's been working for a very long time as part of a system that often for many people don't work in that system. It's got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more employment, and there's this kind of thing that you have to navigate in order, and income maximisation. That's just two words for me that it just fills me full of dread, because there's so many people in our community that their income's been maximised to capacity and they still cannot manage on a daily basis. So for me, and I don't want to be derogatory about anyone's job, because I know lots of people are doing their best, but we have a system, and we talk about welfare reforms, we're talking about the new Social Scotland Social Security, and that the truth of the matter is, unless we undo, stop all the shit that's not working, and have the political will to almost start again, universal basic income. During COVID-19, everyone was talking about it. It was all over Twitter, Facebook, everybody. There's no political will to do that. You know, nobody will man up and say, wait a minute, we've got a system that employs, I don't know how many people, right? I'm not even going to pretend. But think about all the workers that are employed in a system that don't work. Think about all the workers that are paid to do all these initiatives that are meeting immediate needs. Can I just say, see, without the volunteers, the unpaid workers, my organisation, lots of us are belly up. Serial people in communities who do things off their own back for no wages. That's the people that can really make a difference here. But the challenge is, Kevin, you were spot on. See at the top, like I'm community development, right? So that's my background. I'm a great believer that people can rise above peer support, recovery movements. I'm right there. But what we have is a hierarchy that takes the passion, the voice, the energy out of communities. And then we're all there trying to build that up again. And then we all do it in such a way that we are meeting the needs of the statutory and the national, local organisations. And it's, you know, do you think you could get us some people who are experiencing poverty, because we're doing this piece of work with the Poverty Alliance, or we're doing this. Where are their voices when no one's got a specific piece of work? You know, so lived experience, Kevin, that's around, like, we're getting really fed up with service user, client. We're trying to give or support people in an ownership of their story. You're spot on, we have all got lived experience. So unless we can look at, so when I speak about recovery, I talk about recovery, my recovery. I can talk about someone else's recovery, I can talk about a recovery group. But unless we start saying, right, we've got all this, that's brilliant, that'll help people as they need it, because they need it more especially now than ever, I would say before, but that's not enough anymore. See the chap down south, the footballer, didn't he do brilliantly? But he did brilliantly, and he says, wait a wee minute, this isn't enough. This is just what people are needing just now. We've got to look at medium to long-term solutions. So that young man is already got a task force to look at medium and long-term. We've did this in our communities for decades. We're not looking at medium and long-term. We are saying, oh, that's a great group, let's do that. And we're promoting all the great stuff, but we're not being big or brave enough to look at medium or long-term and getting people in positions of power on board to be able to say, wait a wee minute, this isn't working, and something else is going to have to come in at some point. John had mentioned about the poverty. All that poverty, when we've got so much wealth, So something's got to give. Something's got to give. So in any way, shape or form, we've got to start looking at things different. It's even employment, it's going to be a huge issue. You know, should we not be reducing that people are working a 4-day week, a 3-day week to enable other people to get jobs? You know, we put the retirement age up to 67. I don't bloody want to be working when I'm 67. Did I think enough to have something to fall back on? The thing is, I don't work, I've got no income. And I don't have any pension coming at me because I haven't worked for a statutory body. You know what I mean? So I just wasn't savvy enough. I'm not poor, I'm not pretending to be, but I need to work to live. But I shouldn't be working till I'm 67. I don't want to work till I'm 67, but somebody should be coming in. I'm not going to employ me. If I lost my job tomorrow, who's going to give me a job? But they shouldn't, because a young person needs to come in and get a job. So they need to, governments now need to look at what they've got in place, and they need to do something that is beyond just for daily, weekly rhetoric of what's happening. And my fear is COVID is going to just be the excuse for not doing anything. And I think that's why, for me, working in communities, we've really got to try and build communities just for them to believe that they have an opportunity to make a difference. But it's got to be beyond that immediacy. It's got to go beyond the short term and the quick fix and the firefighting and the elastoplast. And see that the first 1,000 days, Kevin, what a fantastic thing to be saying, because see that prevention, early intervention, intensive supports. You don't go into someone and, you know, they get 20 hours or something, or they get 3 months. Get them years, you know, be intensive, wrap around. You keep on talking about, here in Inverclyde, we got the team around the child, or that's a whole holistic. Where's the team around the family? Where's the team around? We've got to start thinking that we've got to be inclusive and nurturing to all our people. And there's got to be opportunities. Like here in Inverclyde, now, what we have is we have a lot of people, myself being one of them, and I'd be seen as a do-gooder. Like, I'm not in it, but I'm trying to assist or help. And that's what I am, I'm a do-gooder. But what we've got to be doing is it's about opportunity. You're talking about poverty, you're talking about poverty of love, poverty of money. There's poverty of opportunity for people to get involved. And the whole thing around COVID and all the brilliant supports, see many people who have been ignored and marginalised in their community their entire life. They have been saying in COVID they have never known such support, or people being interested or listening to how they feel. So what does that make us feel about how we behave in our community? So I think it's just a big learning curve. And for me, really, thank you very much for this, but this would really get me to just go right back into lots of research we've done. And can I just say, we did work over the last 2 years, a lot of work. But you're that busy with other bits of work that just falls by the wayside. So we need to just get back to basics. And when we're going out in localities, we've got to start getting these wee bits and snippets of information out to our communities. And we have a wonderful woman on the Challenging Inverclyde Poverty Group, and she would be deemed as myself a do-gooder. And she has says what she does is she gives out little snippets of information to her friends, all during COVID, that are quite political. So I know John's saying he's trying not to be. So she'll do snippets about whichever party or leader or whomever, and she puts it out to her friends, who she says are all very well to do and they have nice lives. And she just gives them snippets of information and just says, is this okay with you? And how bloody wonderful is that? So that's the kind of thing that we as the Challenging Inverclyde Poverty Group want to start doing, putting out snippets of information to our community and just saying, is this okay with you? Because we're trying to get the community to get involved in making a difference. And that's what I think we've got to be a wee bit more savvy. But to be honest, it's finding the time and the energy to do that when we've got all our other stuff to do. So that's where we are. I'm going to stop talking. That's me done.
Thank you, Alice. I had been on a workshop and we talked about kind of negative labels, and do-gooder was one of them. So we changed it to good doer. So change that round to good doer. It sounds much more positive. You know, a lot of what you talked about there is where the basis of revolution is, and it's within our values, and it's around, you know, giving people that belief. You talked about income maximisation and the amount of people that, you know, are maxed to the hilt, but they've got you know, aspirations, and they've got abilities, and this is about helping people to be able to get there. It's about providing that emotional support. So it's about offering that free counselling service, so there's no barrier. It's not going to cost them anything. It's about being able to provide that coaching service so that they can meet their potential. And you know, Revolution for Good will also have a progression fund in place where we'll support people to be able to take steps forward, you know, and actually achieve things and get better jobs, so that they're not income maxed to the hilt, that they can actually make things different. But that involves working with all these other agencies, you know, and actually collaborating and being able to put that together, but allowing people to believe in themselves, you know, because they get to that place where they can't. So that's kind of where what the ethos is behind what we're going to be doing. And you know, there's a number of people on the call tonight that are therapists and coaches that will be working with us, and they're really excited and can't wait to get started. No more than one person in particular who's smiling. You know, and so that's really positive, and it's about one family at a time, you know, and making that, it's like the snowball going down the hill, you know. One family gets help and then move on to the next one, and you can only do it a little bit at a time, but that's long term. It's about working with them to achieve that long term goal rather than that short term hit. It's about that long term thing. So I appreciate that. Has anybody else got any other questions or things that they want to say or mention? No. So can I just ask something? Oh, Norma, when you go, Norma, missed that.
Sorry, it was just when you're thinking about, you know, helping, you know, one family at a time, you know, that to me that would be a luxury, you know, to do that. And I know that sounds, you know, bizarre, because, you know, we shouldn't be in the place to have to do it at all, but there's just so many families or individuals out there that need the help, and that is why, you know, having a multi-agency approach, whether it's statutory, whether it's community, whatever it may be, is really important. Because, you know, go back to what Alice was saying, is it needs fundamental change right at the top of politics, and don't want to go there with the politic things. And I'm a firm believer in the, you know, sort of the universal income as well, you know, and you know, I think that's something that would to help people with, in terms of the dignity and respect that, you know, is sought through the Scottish social security system as well, you know. So but you know, aside from that, is that I think that's the thing, is that we've got hundreds of families that are needing the support, and it is such a big, you know, demand on all of our services and all of the agencies to try and do their most, and we're all working really hard to try and do that. And I do, you know, that is sometimes where we do just get head down and concentrate on what we've got in front of us, because we're all trying to work hard, but then that does then mean sometimes we get blinkered by that. and we work sort of across the way, where we should be working in partnership more, but sometimes it's challenging, just get your head down and just have to deal with what's in front of you. But the community, that working in partnership and that working as a community is so important. And it's so important that all our community groups and volunteers or officers or whoever do understand what support is out there for people, because we're not just there to support people who need the support, we're there to support the community groups as well, because a lot of people who are volunteers in community groups don't necessarily have maybe the knowledge themselves, so we're there to support, and not everybody has to have knowledge of everything, but they just need to know who to go to get that support. So that's really important. But yeah, the demand, obviously with COVID, it's escalated. It was pretty hellish beforehand, but now it's it's, I don't know how much times worse that it is, but yeah, we just have to keep our heads down, but keep on speaking to our partner organisation, our communities. And I think that's that we have, well, I've certainly seen from COVID is that community groups have completely stepped there, and there's no excuse really about people not being aware of poverty now. As before COVID, in Moray, we were trying to educate people in Moray of giving people an awareness of poverty in Moray. We have to do that now. Thanks very much, COVID, but that's the situation that we're in. At least people are more aware of people being in poverty now. And there's more acceptance and a willingness to try and help people in poverty, which can only be a good thing.
Totally. I think that there is a huge willingness out there, and it's and it's growing, and it's about, I suppose, jumping on the bandwagon and I suppose supporting that. And that's part of why I wanted to do this, because I think the community is the key to this. I've been doing a bit of research, and it looks that many communities in the States are already going really well with this, and the three things that they're really looking at is helping parents with relationships, childcare, and supporting parents. That thing that Kevin said, that wraparound, making sure that support is there so that they can be a parent, but helping them to kind of believe in themselves and creating a much more supportive community. And I think that given that and all of the other partnership approaches that can be involved, I think it could work. It's just my personal opinion. Does anybody have anything else to say before I kind of say ta-ta? No? Brian?
Sorry, my microphone was off. I don't know if my screen's frozen. I think my screen's frozen.
Yeah, but we can hear you. I can't see you, but we can hear you.
It's fine. There's a couple of people have said, not wanting to be political, but why should we not be political? Whoever came up with the term 0 hours contract, should be publicly flogged.
Yeah.
And it's the powers that be that, don't stop these kind of policies. Massive outcry about the effect on the hospitality industry during COVID. Yet a lot of the time, some of these guys are in probably the lowest paid jobs in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they not want to be political about it and make it a fair wage for a fair day's work rather than, paying somebody a ridiculous amount of money? We should be political about it.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's easy to be political, but as long as you're not, it's not about party politics. And it's about, I suppose, standing up for what you believe in. As long as you leave party politics at the door, because that's really not helping anybody. But for me, I try not to, because I get frustrated. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has got anything they want to feed back on that, but you know, certainly being Sue, I don't want to be political, but that's only my personal thing.
Well, for me, I think the personal is political in everyday life. Not that I'm judging anyone else for what they believe, but it's like my activism. It's like being courageous to speak some of the truths and push out the boundaries and ask the awkward questions, channel my rage, and not to waste energy, because I have found in a lot of my work over the years as a counsellor in community groups, and is if I waited, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying this, but if we waited for the statutory bodies to do it, some of the stuff just wouldn't have got done. And it's often at grassroots level what comes from the bottom up where the fire is. So I think channeling my passion and my rage is my own way of being political.
Thanks, Sue.
Oh.
Anybody else?
Being part of revolution, for me, a revolution for good, is political.
Okay. Let's say, Debbie, thank you. That I'm not sure about being political, but I think that when we look at systems and how systems need change, because we live so much in old systems where some of the most inspirational people are not being able to be inspirational because they work within a system that prevents them working in that sense. And that sort of comes across where in my field of work, where we have criminal justice systems, educational systems, healthcare systems, social work systems, which is so outdated. While we are trying to move forward, system holds so many people back. I meet so many wonderful social workers who have to work within a system that then prevents them being the wonderful social workers that they should be. People need to look at that, and when we challenge systems, we're actually challenging government, and when we're challenging government, then that's political. But then we go back to community, it's into the community as when we talk about having a good community basis, having the foundation. When you build something on a solid foundation, your community, and having that voice and taking that risk, it's about challenging systems and challenging what's happening within that. I'm a boundary breaker in a sense where.
No, Kevin, I would never have guessed that.
But see, the thing is, I remember being at an event when I spoke about child protection. Why I was saying that child protection was a very scary word for many families and young people. And I was trying to point out that when the young people that I work with today, when I'm trying to say that the support you'll get for your child from the social work system is called child protection, because they're trying to protect your child. And what I said at that event that day was, I said, is if we could just change the wording round about, like you'd said about something you said earlier about changing something, and I said change it to protecting children rather than child protection, and educate, which Norma was talking about, was how do we educate and let people understand that nobody's here to take your child away, we're here to give you the best care, to support and help you. And I remember a government minister coming up to me and saying, "Hi Kevin, I'm whoever I am from the lead in Scottish Government for child protection, and we'll change that tonight," she said. And I thought, wow, we're going to change child protection to protecting children, protect their children, right? And it never happened. You know what I mean? And I'm just
Kev.
voice, you know what I mean? And it's that, and it's about, we need everybody's voices. You know what I mean? I'm only one voice, but it's a community. We can have a louder, bigger voice, and that for me is about how do we change systems to better help people in the work that they do.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. When I met you, when I worked at Serenians in Bathgate, I had left criminal justice social work because I couldn't help people within that system, I just didn't have the freedom to be able to help people to the level that they needed help. There was just too many. You have to stop there, and you can't do that, and you can't help. You can't do this, and you can't do that. And I got really, really frustrated. And I think that it's about breaking down those systems and actually saying, you know, that's not working for people. So I totally agree with that. I think, Jo, you were going to say something. Oh, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the thinking out loud as I've been listening, because I'm wondering if the poverty conversation is going to change because of COVID, because poverty is going to have touched many more people's lives. And I think, you know, there's lots of folk where, you know, poverty happened to other people and didn't happen to them, that are now finding themselves in situations that they never anticipated. And I wonder actually if that's going to kind of strengthen the poverty conversation going forward. So it's just a kind of out loud thought, and I don't know if it's right, but I'm just, yeah, just a...
It just depends on whether they do something about it, and whether they listen, because I'm not sure whether they will. And that would have been probably a good question for John, but he had to run off because it's bedtime. You know, the interesting thing of that challenging those ideals, the reason that the organisation is called Revolution for Good is because we're starting a revolution, and the idea is that we, you know, we're bringing people into the heart of that, so that we can make change based on what they want, on what they need, and if that means that we have to challenge those barriers, that'll be something that the organisation will go forward and do, because the people at the heart of the organisation, the shareholders, we currently got a share offer open, you know, to allow the community to own part of this organisation, and to Sue, thanks Sue for my able assistant, to be able to own the solution to this issue, and to be able to take part and be part of something, and it was important, you know, just being part of something so important, particularly it was important for me, and this is a long-term thing, so we wanted this to be community owned so that it has that longevity that Alice was talking about not happening. We need it to have that longevity. We need it to be owned by the community. And I think some of the organisations out there, funders, have definitely seen a change. Cora Foundation have realised that actually giving an organisation funding for a year to deal with poverty is not good enough, and they've changed it to 5 years. And that's a real positive, because we realise that things are not just going to happen with 1 year funding, and you know, it's about making sure that we're doing this over a long time, because the problems weren't made overnight; they were made over a very, very long time, and it's about it'll take a long time, and it's only going to be a little bit at a time. But if we're all doing our bit and we're all doing, you know, a wee bit here and there, then it'll definitely work. It's 9 o'clock, so I am going to say night night to everybody and say thank you so much for coming along. And for those that are not here, I'll apologise if their email went into their junk mail. And say, yeah, that's great. And I think, to be honest, what I will do at some point is forward on to everybody the slides, because John has said that he'll provide them. And you know, anything that comes from this, I will let you all know. So thank you very much, and good night.